Hey everyone, we have a great interview for you today. I'm joined now by Ethan Cox and Gabrielle Brassard-Lecours of ricochet.media. Ethan and Gabrielle, welcome to the show.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So before we get to the fight that you're about to have in court, why don't you give me some examples of Ricochet's work, including investigative pieces and the kind of stories that you've broken?
Take it away, Gab. I'll follow up.
Well, as you know, we're a bilingual outlet, so we have French and English content. On the French side, one of the first story that we broke and that other outlets talked about a lot is the fact that Canada was selling arms to Arabic Saudi. I don't know, Arabia Saudite. So that was the
Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, sorry. So that was the first big story that we broke 4 years ago, and a lot of other outlets talked about it.
Hmm.
More recently, we during the last provincial election campaign in Quebec, we broke a story about the the fact that the Economic Institute of Montreal is really uh, close to some oil lobbying, and that explains why they have a really climatic skeptical positions in the public space.
Hmm.
So that was a big story that we broke too. And otherwise, yeah, we do other stuff. We won a prize for our first French series of podcasts. So yeah, it's the kind of work we do.
You're also up for you're a finalist in the Canadian Association of Journalists annual awards as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's on the English side, Gab. What she's mentioning there with the Saudi arms deal was actually that we were the first outlet on that story a year before the Globe covered it in our French edition. On the English side, recently we did an investigation last year into a white supremacist web store that was run by a number of active members of the Canadian Forces, as well as people that were very well connected to both the Federal Conservative Party and the UCP in Alberta. That's the story that we're a finalist for Canadian Association of Journalists Award for this year. Just about a month ago, we broke another really labor-intensive investigation into how interference by a Liberal MP may have scuttled an investigation into a Canadian multinational group of companies. So, following up on SNC, more political interference on that level. We have relatively low capacity compared to a lot of outlets, but we've been able to punch above our weight and break a lot of big stories that have been covered in turn by a lot of other media outlets, gotten a lot of attention. As Gab was mentioning, we also have a really active podcast network that has won awards in both English and French. Which is, becoming probably one of the largest left-wing podcast networks in the country.
Hmm.
And in addition to the investigative journalism that we do, we also try to provide a platform for opinion content that comes from a different perspective. There's very much a consensus around the status quo when it comes to the opinion pages of major newspapers and mainstream media outlets in Canada. And so we try and provide a platform for debates on the left about what direction the country and various political parties and movements should be taking. The other thing that's important to know about our website is we're crowdfunded, so our funding comes from individual donors who are our readers. Over 70% of our audience is under 40, and over 80% of our audience comes from social media. So we're a media outlet that's really trying to respond to the challenges of journalism in the 21st century, both in terms of developing a sustainable financial model that doesn't rely on ads but relies on the support of readers, and also in terms of trying to take a different editorial position. We're exactly like any other media outlet. The difference is that they all have editorial positions that largely support the status quo, while
Yeah.
we try to have an editorial position that challenges the status quo.
Yeah, I will say there definitely is a lack of Canadian media outlets that challenge the status quo, and Ricochet are one of the leaders, definitely on that. Which brings us to next month. So Ricochet is going to court to fight for press freedom. So can you give me a breakdown of what led to that point, and also ultimately what the case is about?
So it's been over our head for about 3 years now. We published a satirical piece in 2016 by one of our bloggers on Richard Martineau, who's a really famous columnist, really right-oriented, and so we did an humoristic piece on him that was a false obituary. And apparently he didn't take it too well. So about 8 months after we published the piece, without any previous notice, we received a lawsuit in Superior Court. So he's asking us $350,000 for defamation and personal damages. So at the time, we didn't have any lawyers on our backs. We didn't have any money to support this defense. So we did another crowdfunding that was really successful. The public opinion was really responsive on that crowdfunding, and really they supported us pretty well. But it takes time, like every court thing. So we've been just waiting on the trial dates. And we had that date a year and a half ago, last February, and it's finally coming. So yeah, we are going to trial on May 15. The trial starts. It's supposed to last about 4 or 5 days. So yeah, that's basically what led to that point.
And just to jump in for viewers in the rest of Canada and in the States. Martineau is a ubiquitously known figure in Quebec, very much someone that people love to hate. He's a provocateur, and so his whole shtick is to be as provocative and offensive as possible, and whenever he's criticized for it, he defends himself on the basis of free speech. So he's what you might call a free speech warrior, and I think we see a lot of these type of commentators in the rest of Canada and in the United States. And I think a trend we're starting to see with these people who suggest that they are all about free speech is that free speech is only for them and not for anyone who would dare to criticize them. And if you actually use your free speech to criticize them, then they're going to do everything in their power to use their money and their influence to shut you down. So I think there are a lot of parallels in this case to the Peter Thiel and Gawker case. Peter Thiel had a much better case against Gawker than Richard Martineau has against us, but it's the same sort of idea where somebody is incensed that they would be targeted by something that is perfectly legitimate content for a media outlet to publish, and thinks they can use their power and their influence and their money to punish people for having the temerity to satirize them, to treat them like the public figures that they are and hold them to account for their statements. Our lawyers would not be happy if we were to get too much into characterizing Richard Martineau. So I'll leave it to your viewers to do their own Googling. But he is, his statements on Muslims in particular, on transgender people, on a variety of socially marginalized groups are extreme, are upsetting, have certainly been characterized by many people as hateful. And so, what the author of this piece in question tried to do was to satirize that extremism. And it's a piece that falls squarely within the bounds of fair comment. It never should have ended up in court. And the fact that it has is really, I think, a worrying sign for a trend that is much broader than this case, of trying to shut down, intimidate, bully media outlets into refraining from criticizing public figures. And it works. I mean, for the last 3 years, while this lawsuit has hung over our heads, we certainly haven't been aggressive in challenging Richard Martineau, because anything we say could, be used against us in court. So even when you're willing to go to court, even when you're willing to fight and you're completely unwilling to fold in the face of this type of intimidation, it still has an impact, and it has a real chilling effect on press freedom. And, nobody should be more subject to satire, to criticism, than somebody who is one of the largest media figures in a province like Quebec, who has a major platform in newspapers, on radio, and on television. They should absolutely be subject to criticism. And that's what this lawsuit is about, is whether we have the right to criticize Richard Martineau in the same way, and in fact in gentler terms, than Richard Martineau turns around and criticizes so many others that don't have the platform that he has.
So discuss the potential threat here to press freedom. Let's say he wins the case. What ultimately would be the impact on the press in Canada?
Well, on Canada, I don't exactly know, but on us, I mean, the issue for us is our all survival. I mean, if we lose and we are accountable for the money he asked, that and he really knows that we don't have that money, our really only option is to shut down. So we put the key in the door and we close down. That's the main issue. And on a broader aspect, yeah, for free speech, it's gonna create a very a very important precedent. I don't know how to say that, because it means that someone like Richard Martineau and the empire he works in, which is Québécois, who owns like 40% of the media in Quebec, can shut down any media that criticize their star or people like Martineau. So this will be really, really, it will endanger all the free speech, I think.
Yeah, in terms of the precedent that risks being set, if Martineau were to win, then it would establish a precedent that would, I think, prevent media outlets from engaging in criticism, engaging in satire of powerful and litigious right-wing figures who whip up fear and consternation about, Muslims and minorities. And that's the exact opposite of what we need in our media right now. People that are making money, making clicks, making votes off of, exploiting people's fear, exploiting people's ignorance or unawareness of what Muslims are like, what people that they're not familiar with are like. Those people need to be challenged. So, this case needs to be put in a broader context. In Quebec of late, Eric Duhaime, who's a shock radio host on Radio X, which is, a similar sort of political orientation radio station in Quebec, recently sent a mise en demeure to a member of the National Assembly for having criticized things that were said on his radio show. We also saw a mise en demeure sent to Radio Canada, which is the French CBC, because a black woman who is a columnist for Le Devoir went on television and cited specific examples of racism on certain Quebec radio stations. So even for going on television and quoting specific examples, you're getting threatened with being sued. So there's a serious chilling effect that's happening, and we're seeing it in the rest of Canada as well. Michael Buckard, a freelance writer, was recently sued by the president of a free speech club at an Ontario university for criticizing him. I think a lot of people are familiar with the Ben Couche case, the Vice reporter who went all the way to the Supreme Court and was ordered to turn over information on one of his sources, which is a serious threat to press freedom. I think a lot of people are also familiar with the Justin Brake case, who had to go all the way to the Court of Appeal to defend himself against charges that were laid against him for covering a protest, for being, violating an injunction against trespassing as a working journalist in order to follow the people who were protesting that he was covering. So we're seeing a trend in Quebec and in Canada to use the courts to try and shut down criticism, to try and shut down coverage that people don't want to see. And the real issue there is the precedent that is set legally is a problem, but the real issue is the chilling effect that it then has, because editors and journalists working in newsrooms across the country see these cases and they follow them, and they factor into their decision the next time they decide whether to publish something that is going to anger someone who is rich and powerful and well-connected. And so the outcome of this case, I think, is critically important. If Martineau loses, then the emperor has no clothes. And I think that that will empower journalists and editors to be more aggressive, to do their job with less fear, and to challenge powerful figures. And by the same token, if we lose, then I think that's going to have a significant chilling impact for a number of years on that kind of work. Because if you're a journalist and an editor and you publish, hundreds of pieces a year, do you want to put all that at risk to criticize someone powerful, or do you maybe want to let them slide in order to protect the other work you're doing? So that's really, I think, what's at stake here.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not even just about the legal precedent, but also the cultural precedent that it sets on the press and their ability in terms of their feeling to be able to actually challenge the status quo, which is, I mean, we need more outlets like Ricochet that are willing to challenge the status quo. And I think that if you are able to win this case, and I think you will, that will free people up to be more willing to actually challenge those that are in power. So before we go here, tell us again where people can go to support Ricochet in this fight and just overall.
Sure. Well, people should visit our website, ricochet.media. We recently published an editorial in both French and English. We're one of the only media outlets in Canada, apart from the CBC, that has distinct French and English editions, so you can read it in both languages. But the most important thing that people can do to support us is to become a member of Ricochet. As Gabrielle was mentioning, back in 2016, when we announced this, we did a crowdfunder and we were able to raise over $50,000 to support our legal defense. We've got a great team of lawyers that have been working for us, donating a huge amount of their time to this case. So we're prepared to go to court in May. We have the resources that we need to mount a defense, and we're feeling confident about our ability to win. But what we really need is we need support for this model of journalism. And we see now in the world that the old model of journalism, which is advertising supported corporate owned media outlets, is failing. They're like dinosaurs stalking the media landscape. Advertising supported media just doesn't work. So we're going to get one of two outcomes out of what's happening right now. We're either going to get media that we don't have to pay for, that serves the interests of whoever is paying for it. And we already see more and more sponsored content, advertorials. We're going to see more and more of this type of thing where even where it's not obvious, the news that you're consuming and you're reading is designed to serve a particular corporate interest. Or we're going to reach into our own pockets and we're going to pay for public interest media that tells the truth and that serves no higher master than the readers. And that's what we're trying to offer is that model. But it only works if people support it. So I hope that people will read our editorials, and I hope that people will go to our website, become a member, make a donation of $5, $10, or $25 a month to support the award-winning work that we do. Because if people don't, then media like this will cease to exist, and all of the media that we consume will be driven by corporate interests and corporate bottom lines. And we already see how problematic that is. If you wonder why it is the media are so out of touch, for instance, when it comes to climate change, when we are all reading the science and the reports and we know what's happening on climate change, but you read media and it's a totally different world where it makes perfect sense to build all the pipelines we can and to continue to massively expand the oil sands. That has a lot to do with the corporate interests that own so many of the media outlets in this country. So if you value independent public interest journalism, it's important to support it. It's important to support shows like yours. I know you have a Patreon as well, David. Yeah. And to support outlets like Ricochet, because if we don't pay for the media that we need and that we want, it will disappear.
Great. So I'll have those links to support Ricochet below the video, so any viewers can go check out and support Ricochet here. And thanks for joining me, Ethan and Gabrielle, and good luck in your fight.
Thank you.
Thank you.